All right, welcome everybody to the Great Plains Regeneration Farmer Friday webinar series. I am glad that you are all here. And without further ado, let's get started. So I have a project for all of you right now. Take out your cell phone and open up to your camera application. Open that up because your first assignment here is to join our QR code, which I thought was the very first slide, but it's not. Okay, so scan your QR code right here. It should pop up Great Plains Regeneration, and you will have the ability to follow along on your cell phone as I present. So as I mentioned, I'm Jessica Gnad. I'm the Executive Director for Great Plains Regeneration. Today, we are so happy to have some of our really amazing friends with us. We have Russell Hedrick from Hickory, North Carolina, and we have Dr. Liz Haney, who's down in Salado, Texas. And we're going to be talking about moving beyond the practices of regenerative agriculture. And we're really going to do a deep dive on how these two experts have been able to create long-term approaches to building better soil health. So super excited about that. Let's move on here. Here is a little bit of our contact information for Great Plains Regeneration. You can grab a screenshot, but I also will be putting all of these slides in the chat feature. So if you missed it on this, you can capture it later. So a little bit about GPR. We are a nonprofit and we have launched out of Manhattan, Kansas, although we are working in all of the states in the Great Plains, pretty much that central core of the United States. And what we really want to do is we're working with farmers and ranchers and regenerative leaders to really enhance the soil health education of this area and to really make lasting and impactful changes. Our goal is to allocate resources for the regional food system while increasing opportunities to producers. And Liz and Russell have some amazing things that they're going to share with you about ways that we're actually taking concepts and turning them into reality. So overall, we're looking at increasing the soil health to enhance animals, people, the planet, to create a better biodiversity with the ultimate goal that is supporting the human and socioeconomic resiliency that we all desire. So I always have to give a shout out to our partner. GPR works closely with Kansas Alliance for Wetlands and Streams. They are a nonprofit that has been serving the Kansas community for over 25 years. And so what Great Plains Regeneration is able to do is we're able to bring in our network of farmers and ranchers into this conversation of better water quality. So a number of you on this call actually traveled to Lawrence, Kansas with us almost a month ago to have a big party for soil. It was our kickoff campaign to announce Great Plains Regeneration. I know Liz was there. I saw Kristen on the phone. I don't have all the attendees up here right now, but I know a number of you were there. So I'm going to have you just watch a little video. Okay, awesome. You'd think this is my first Zoom call. But thank you guys so much for watching that video, and we can talk more about beer later if you'd like to. Like the video stated, Great Plains Regeneration partnered with a really fantastic brewer in the Northeast Kansas region, and we made a regenerative beer using Kansas-grown turkey red wheat. So lots of possibilities, lots of big concepts to talk about. But for right now, I would like to transition over to our speakers. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to queue up Russell Hedrick and Dr. Liz Haney. How are you guys today?
Good.
All right. Well,
doing good, Jessica. How are you?
Oh, I'm fantastic. Thank you for asking. So this is really amazing because I've had the pleasure to meet Russell Hedrick many, many years ago, and he's the one that introduced me to Liz. I don't even remember how many years ago, and it was just a text message, and it was with the two of us, and he's like, "You guys should know each other," and that was it. And I swear after that point, I was like, "Hey, Liz, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? You guys have just really been great people to bounce ideas off." So let's go ahead and get into the nuts and bolts about what you do. Russell, I'd like to introduce you first. And you are a first generation farmer out of Hickory, North Carolina. You really have an amazing story to tell about how you got into farming as a first generation farmer. So if you wouldn't mind, could you just give us a little bit of your background, how you got here? And then the second question I'm going to ask you after that is, why soil health? So without further ado, everybody, Mr. Russell Hedrick.
I just want all y'all to know that Jessica said I was going to have to talk about my feelings, and that's not going to happen. I just think that's kind of funny, but so I'm a first generation farmer. I started out as a full-time fireman. My grandpa raised a small set of herd, maybe 10, 15 cows. And we raised out cow-calf pairs, sold calves. I made hay with him, and that kind of sparked my interest into agriculture. And then 2012 is our first year that we had our farming operation. And we started with 30 acres, started farming. Essentially, minus the tillage. Everybody's concept around here was the conventional way of heavy use of chemicals, synthetic fertilizer, and I really got introduced to the right people at the right time. I believe just learning about no-till practices, cover crops, even though we really didn't understand all the benefits and implications that came from using these regenerative practices. And it's been a lot of grace that we've learned along the way. We've implemented new practices and integrated livestock back onto the land, cover cropping all of our acres. We started, growing non-GMO crops, and then started growing a lot of heirloom varieties as well. Started into alcohol production in 2013. Partnered up with Foothills Distillery, and they do moonshine, they do bourbon, they do the first bourbon Carolina Prohibition, and really it's just been a lot of fun to get around and see other ways that people are farming in the country, and the way that we can improve our operation, and meeting fun people like Jessica, and being able to work with them, and it's kind of fun to see as things have evolved. And we've started looking at vertical integration and stacking our enterprises. We're really looking at a lot of new ways to put farmers first, and really be able to maximize return on investment for the hard work that we put in.
So Russell, I took like a ton of notes there about some concepts that you talked about. And for just doing this, not quite 10 years, you've had the fortune to be able to travel really all over the world, talking about soil health. What's been the most common theme as you talk to people from all over the world, and then even all over the United States? What's kind of the common theme? And then bring it home a little bit to the Midwestern region that you guys kind of have a focus on right now.
I think the common thing is, I think farmers are very frustrated. I think farmers are frustrated at the current, model of agriculture, where we're at, where we've came from. I think farmers are good stewards. They do care about the land. They care about the consumer. I haven't met a single farmer yet that really didn't care about the consumer. But I think the problem is there's been an access to information, that farmers need the confidence and the understanding of the tools that we're using, and we've had successes, we've had failures. And I think farmers are in such a financial pinch that they're afraid to sometimes step out on their own. And I think that's where that peer-to-peer network of having farmers talk to farmers, on the consulting side, some of the things that GPR and Soil Regen are working on, even in conjunction with one another, being able to, talk to farmers about what's good, what's bad, where we've had successes and failures, I think really is what pushes this movement forward and really gets it out of that early adopter group and start getting towards, more shifts of mindsets of how farmers are producing the food that we consume. And I think that's what it's going to take. We all know that, the model we're in right now is not sustainable, but we also don't understand. I'd say we understand 1% of what we're actually doing. And most of the time it's working out in our favor. And we take notes and try to treat it as scientifically as we can. But the problem is there's no science in agriculture. No year in 10 years that I've been farming has the weather ever been the same, planting condition, harvest conditions. And it really comes down to making the best plan that we can and seeing a good outcome season in and season out. And I think that's the best thing that we could strive for.
Yeah, you brought up a lot of really good points. I love this quote, there's no science in agriculture. And I think that when you switch your mindset from, prescriptive farming into farming in nature's image, it really changes the way that you have to think about a systems approach. And I'll kind of cue you up a little bit because recently, and we've had this conversation, GPR and groups like Soil Regen, we get pulled into a lot of conversations. We get pulled into a lot of conversations with CPG companies, very consumer facing companies. And sometimes it feels like we're speaking a different language. And so a recent study showed that one of the barriers to adoption for soil health practices is lack of trusted advisement. And I do think that's one of the areas that me personally, I like to focus on is farmer-led education. So how did it happen to where you said, okay, I'm going to be a farmer? That was step one. Okay. And then number two, holy crap, how do I do that? And you were very fortunate to meet some really amazing people who gave you some really good advice about soil. You had some economic constraints that didn't allow you to purchase $500,000 worth of equipment in your first year. What was that transition between I'm going to be a farmer to now, almost 10 years later, like, oh my God, I got to tell the world, I've got to be working as a consultant. I've got to be communicating, and I've really got to be out there spreading this message.
Definitely starting in agriculture. It's kind of funny. We actually had a person help us put together a 5-year business plan for the farm. And in 5 years, I wanted to be farming 100 acres. And, just 100 acres of commodity grain was kind of our goal. And regenerative practices, soil health, whatever you want to call it, really just shattered that like a piece of glass. We went from, wanting to farm 100 acres to trying something different. I guess when I had my daughter, it gives me a different perspective on the world that there's somebody that I'm responsible for that one day is going to have, 3 meals a day. All the cool thing for my generation of farmers is there's guys all across the country. There's David Brandt and Ray Stiers and even Gabe and when he started farming. None of these guys had the technology that my generation does. I mean, just the phone that I'm holding in my hand today to talk to y'all is probably more powerful than, how we sent somebody to the moon, as far as computing power. And to me, it really does come down to being able to, manage our data on the farm, understand what we're doing, use the technologies that my generation has to do better. And that's about as simple as I can say it. Is we have the technology, we have the means, and that's a big hard hitting point for a lot of the farmers that I do talk to when I go speak. They talk about how their granddad farmed and how their dad farmed, and some of them even their great grandpa. And the way I resonate back to them about it is they use the best technology to farm the best way that they could in the time that they farmed. And if we're farming the way that they did, we're not doing that. And I don't want somebody to say, 20 years from now that I could have done better. We're trying to constantly try new things. And, our big thing is if you don't fail at least one thing a year, you probably didn't try hard enough. It's really not that hard to fail at some things in agriculture. And, for us to try new things and at least fail at a few and learn from those mistakes and critique it is the best that my generation can do, and really get an understanding of this system.
Yeah, and that doesn't bring just a little bit of tear to your eye, because I felt that in my heart when you said that, Russell. No, I get paid extra if I can, I can get tears out of you. Well, we've talked about this. I forgot if it was when Tom Cannon was on the call, or maybe I was talking to Deanna. It does feel like regenerative ag. When I started talking about it years ago, I didn't know anything about regenerative. It was you and your group of renegade farmers, no-till in the plains. I didn't know that it was called regenerative. And so now we've got that. And what you just described to me, it almost feels like a 2.0. It almost feels like we're having another one of those growth bubbles, and that the 2.0 of regenerative ag, or whatever you want to call it, it's going to look different than what the original folks, the original farmers maybe thought. And there might be some friction, I don't know. I'd love to hear your opinion on that. And then from there, our good buddy, Liz Haney, she's ready. She's chomping at the bit. She wants to get in here. So Liz, I'm going to cue you up after this to chime in on that. But Russell, how is the future? How will it look different?
When I first started farming, I was a YouTube junkie. I mean, I honestly, magazine articles and YouTube videos and making phone calls was one of the best ways for me to connect to the system that I thought at the time that we wanted to try to mimic and work within. I definitely say it really feels like there has been a tremendous change in the view of agriculture, even in the last year since the pandemic hit. And even before that, it was another change. And, I hope we feel this way every year. I hope every year that there's something new and exciting coming out, new testing methods, or, just different ways that we're able to produce food for the public in this country. And whether it be something that, is an industry disruptor to where, one of the projects, that we're working on, we might get to talk about is, the Regen meals deal, and being able to actually meal food on somebody's farm instead of sending it to a large facility with no tracing and no variability. Or, the simple fact of how we're managing our livestock in our operation. I mean, it seems like everything is consumer driven to a certain point. And, I can't tell you how many things that I've seen change legislatively in agriculture, some for the good, some for the bad. I think we sometimes make strides and sometimes we step backwards, but in the end of the day, it's a change, and it's us moving forward. And I think that, farmers being less than 2% of the population right now, we've really got to be able to get out there and tell our story, and to be able to advocate for what we're doing, because we all know the squeaky wheel gets the grease. I know it's kind of a funny saying, but it's pretty true. It's something I learned when I was a fireman. The squeaky wheel got the grease, or maybe even fired. I don't know. Sometimes you got to push that limit to see where you can get. But it's going to take all of us together doing it collectively. And that's what I'm excited for is I think you came up with the Soul Squad, and really being able to have a group of people that, we can bounce ideas off of and really push this thing.
Yeah, I love that. The greasy wheel gets or the squeaky wheel gets the grease. I think that's going to be the title of my next blog post. But you're right. It all happened as like this big explosion, this big boom. There's just a certain anybody in this group just started to get together and bounce ideas off. And I kind of call it, the soil squad, or maybe it's the circus. I don't know. We might be the soil circus when we show up places, but that's a really bad transition over to to the next leg of our presentation. Go ahead, Russell. I think I cut you off.
Oh, I just said I'm part of Team Sasquatch. You gotta keep it.
Today was funny t-shirt day. We all didn't plan it, but we all have on our funny soil t-shirts. And speaking of funny soil t-shirts, you can purchase some of our merchandise at the GPR website or over at the Ag Soil Regen website. We have some information over there. So Liz, I'd love to introduce you to the group, and kind of the same framework of questions. I'd love to just hear a little bit about yourself and how this transformation happened. You weren't always focused on the soil in your professional career. So I'd love to just learn a little bit about you and tell me how that came about.
Okay, well, I'm going to go way back. So yeah, I grew up in the desert in West Texas, out in the oil fields. So I wasn't familiar with agriculture at all. And I went to Texas A&M. It was the furthest school away from where I lived that my parents would let me go. So ended up there and got a degree in Wildlife and Fisheries. But I ended up working in a soils lab somehow right after that. And I got really interested in soil science, which is really nerdy now that I think about it. But so I focused on mine soil reclamation. That's what I got my master's in, and worked in regulatory agencies and stuff like that. I met Rick in grad school, and he was always focused on microbial respiration and nitrogen mineralization. So I had to hear about it all the time, but I know I didn't care about it at first. And even when these weird people would come to our house and hang out with us, like Ray Archuleta or Gabe or any of those guys, I'd be like, could y'all stop talking about this, please, for 10 minutes? And it's almost like one day I had an epiphany that if I don't start doing something in this space, like my kids aren't going to have a planet to live on anymore. And so that's when my focus really changed towards soil health and regenerative ag and the soil testing around that, and getting out of that reductionist thinking and back into nature.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about the Haney soil test, because I think like Russell mentioned, farmers are 2% of the total population. Within that 2%, there has been like a status quo of how things get done. And the Haney soil test has challenged that greatly. But more than just a challenge, it's providing a solution. So tell us a little bit more about how this is helping.
Yeah, well, so when it was first developed, the goal was to allow farmers to reduce their nitrogen application. So all these years, we've just been measuring nitrate in the soil. And so the goal was to see those other forms of nitrogen, because we know that even if you don't, apply fertilizer, you're still going to, make a yield. Well, where is that other stuff coming from? So that was the basis for it. And then it just evolved over time as we started to learn more about the soil biology, which is not something we were taught in school, right? So it evolved into, well, these soils are healthier because they have higher respiration. These soils are going to be more efficient at nutrient cycling. And the more that we improve the soil, we can tell from the test, okay, it's got more carbon in the soil. It's got more carbon in play. It's got more nitrogen in play. And it's really helped to, save farmers money. And that's the whole point and focus, is have a greater return on your investment.
Yeah, and it's able to inform us. Everything we do. It's like what Russell said earlier. There's no science in agriculture, and I've heard it said that I think it was Gunderson said all soil tests are wrong. Some soil tests are useful. Did I totally butcher that? Is that the gist of what he says? I don't know.
I don't know what he says.
You
He
never
says a
know.
lot of things.
So, I think that okay, so we have this test, and a part of the mission field that you're in right now is the ability to get this information out to producers so that they can make better decisions at the field level. So give us a little bit of that progression. What's the time frame here? Like when did all this start to come about, and then gauge where we're at now, like what needs to happen?
Yeah, well, the test started being developed in the late 90s, really, the basis for it. But it wasn't until kind of what happened is the test was progressing and being developed while Rick was at the USDA. And he got it to a certain point, and one day he went to give a talk and met Ray Archuleta, and Ray was like, and Ray and Rick got together and they were like, okay, this is what we can do from a soil health perspective with the test. And so from that point on, it really started to grow. I think the first few years that we were doing farmer samples, we'd get, I don't know, a few hundred a year, and then a bunch of research samples. And Rick spent most of his career running samples, for farmers for free. And now the database has, I don't know, over 70,000 samples in it. And then labs started adopting it as well. And so that's being offered in commercial labs has really helped take it to another level. And then as we get more and more information out about what it means on, the profitability side, what it means when we can look at changes in management practices, it makes a very big impact on farmers' lives and their operations. And as more and more people see that, more and more people are wanting to use it.
Yeah, I think that, so, you were able to, in a lot of ways, like Russell, in a lot of ways like me, you drank the Kool-Aid. You went down the rabbit hole, and I feel like everybody's story at some point, it was like, and then this crazy guy walked in the room, and his name was Ray Archuleta. So I think we get to blame Ray for a lot of this, but so that empowered you, and just like what Russell talked about, having this connection to the earth, having this connection to the soil, and then having children. And that was a huge motivator for me to do this kind of work. In a roundabout way, that led you to soil health consulting and environmental consulting. And tell us a little bit about Soil Regen and anything you would like to tell us about that. And I can, go for it.
Okay. Yeah. I started Soil Regen back in 2019. And really, this is how it happened for real. I'm sitting on the back porch with Rick, and I was like, how can I get all of our friends down here to hang out with us? And I was like, okay, I'm going to have a conference. So I started doing that and really enjoyed putting the conference together. And I was like, this is what I want to do, is education. People would come up and say things to me after, like, this changed my life. And it's like, that right there is like crack cocaine, right? I mean, helping people to see things and meet their community and know that they're surrounded by others that have been through those struggles is huge to me. So I had to put Soil Regen on the back burner for a while I went corporate, but am really happy to be out now and working with Sarah and Russell on Soil Regen and rebuilding it and rebuilding our education events and the consulting side and helping people with their Haney Test interpretation. And we have a really diverse group of people working with us, and we're just super excited to be out there and really farmer first and focus on what we can do to help other people.
I love the farmer first. I was fortunate to be able to come down to that event in Texas. And you're right. So like in the beginning, coming from this conventional framework that I had, when you started talking about soil health, the first thing you did is you'd look over one shoulder and look over the other shoulder because you want to find out who is listening to you. And then you start talking about soil health, because you were kind of the nutty person in the room. And in a lot of ways, we still are kind of the nutty person in the room. But because we've been able to form all of these connections, and that's what the GPR Farmer Friday webinar series is about, is making these connections. So we've been able to really scale this up. So I pinned Russell back up here on the screen to talk a little bit more about the Farmer Forward strategy that you guys are working on right now. And, Frank put in the chat box, so what's the plan going forward? Industrial ag is not going to stand by and watch their profits get decimated. And I don't know if you just want to start with the first part of the question, or if you guys just want to go all in. But just talking about how far we've come and where we're at now, what does the plan look like moving forward?
Come on, man, say something.
Well,
I was just sitting here debating. I was like, you tell Frank if he gets in a fight, he can call me because I like to wrestle. I don't think industrial ag wants to stand by. I can't go into details on it, but I can't tell you how many industrial ag companies, whether it be fertilizer, chemical, farmer inputs, companies are realizing that what we're doing is not.
You're muted.
I think you muted yourself, Russell.
Can you hear me now?
I can, yes.
I hold it in my hand. There's a lot of companies that are looking at this regenerative model now and understanding that. I believe they still have a place. They have a place on my farm, and I say that in the fact of I still have fungicide jugs in my chemical storage, but we scout for that. And should there be a need for it, yeah, I'll use it. But we haven't had to use them in, I don't know, 6 going on 7 years now. It's getting to the point it's kind of hard to keep up with. I still use a chemical on my farm instead of, traditionally in my area, you would see a farmer use 3 modes of action at burn down, at least 2 modes of action at a post spray, sometimes 3. And using the practices that we do, we're down to using a quart of gramoxone at burn down. And this year we had record rainfall between January and March. I had a ton of cover crops that got flooded out. Really didn't have good ground cover, and this was one of the first years in the last 5 that we actually had to go out and do some spot spraying and some post spraying on some of our row crop acres. And that's the thing about it, is it's flexible. And do I believe that I nuke my system? Absolutely not. We still are seeing biological activity. We're still seeing all the indicators that we look for. And for me to have to use a second chemical for one time in 5 years, I don't feel bad about it, and I wouldn't knock a farmer about it. So I think these companies are paying attention that they're better off to help farmers than they are to try to continue the model system. And that's something that really is, coming around in our system right now.
Yeah, I've been on a couple calls and maybe even had this conversation with folks on this call. That is the framework. Does the framework look more like offering services like what Soil Regen can do and with Regen Mills? Is that what the system is being built upon, is being able to add a service-based product, not necessarily a chemistry? I don't know. I'm just kind of free, talking somehow. But Liz, so have you guys seen any differences with combinations of practices, or is it a systems approach to soil health that gets the benefit? It's kind of a broad question, isn't it? Do you know what I'm trying to ask?
I think the number one factor that has to do with regenerating soils, and I could be wrong, but this is my personal opinion, is water. It's a conversation I had this morning with a company that, you know, I give compliments to guys like Michael Thompson in Kansas who farm with 15 inches of moisture a year. I would probably cry and drink too much if I only got 15 inches of rain a year. You know, for me, having 45 inches a year. Huh?
Deanna gets 4 inches.
Who?
No, this year I got 4 inches this year.
One of our good friends, north
We like
of us.
16. We like 16.
Well,
She's a grain farmer.
And I've had that year. So 2015 from March, which was when we started planting, until September harvest time, we had 4 inches of rain. And I'm glad that I had that friend, Michael Thompson, that I was able to call, and he essentially talked me off the ledge every day, because it sucked. It was terrible to be a farmer and watch a crop that you put your time and effort and heart and soul into to produce a food sit there and wither and turn all kinds of colors you didn't know plants could. And you know, producers understand that. And, you know, regenerative agriculture has a way of increasing water holding capacity, you know, increasing infiltration, so that when we do get those rains, we get a higher benefit from it. But, you know, water is ultimately, to me, water is the ultimate factor when it comes to soil health and building biology and building biomass and doing everything we're doing. And there are companies that are working to produce products that can help farmers hopefully change and cut down on the amount of time that it takes to build this system. And I'm honestly excited about it. I'm hoping to see, you know, how their stuff turns out and how trials work out and what we see. And, you know, hopefully that'll be a huge impact and a huge benefit to farmers going to these regenerative systems and, you know, ultimately being better at what they're doing.
Yeah, I think we're seeing a lot of that right now. The innovation that's coming down the pipe, I think is going to be really fantastic. And it's like you mentioned, it's everybody coming to the table and sitting down and having these conversations for the greatest impact. And I think, yeah, Liz, what's your take on some of this that's coming down the pipe? Because for a long time, you guys were really up against the traditional testing model, and now there's so many other factors that can help soil health.
Yeah. I was talking to some people, telling them about the Haney Test the other day, and they were putting a whole lot of emphasis on just this one test, right? And so even though it's a great test, that's still like reductionist thinking, just trying to use one test or one tool in the toolbox to figure out how things are working. Because like Russell said, I mean, this is like every year is not the same. Every day is not the same out in the field as far as the soil biology goes. So if we can start using all these different tools that are becoming available as technology advanced, and especially from a soil testing side and a plant testing side, I think the more that we start layering these different tools and realizing more how the biology in the soil functions, that we're going to be able to advance our management recommendations as well. And so I think it's paying attention to, you know, PLFA, plant sap analysis, tissue analysis, even using remote sensing sometimes if it's could help, like in crop scouting, in stacking all of these different tools together so that we can make better management recommendations on the ground. Yeah.
I'm so guilty of this too, Liz. Like even if I'm thinking of like onboarding a project, writing a grant, I always seem to put this back into that reductionist framework, because I'm like, okay, well, you know, we're seeking a project to do this. And the way that all of this is built is you just like pick one thing to focus on. And it is hard to kind of, you know, break out of that system and find ways to look at the projects that you're working on through this regenerative lens. And so it's funny because I've even seen there's so much coming out right now about regenerative thinking. and systems thinking and getting rid of like mechanical thinking. In fact, I wrote this one grant and I had a friend proofread it. And I used a word that referred to a machine versus a word that referred to a natural system. And I think it was like a hub, and we changed it to something else. So it's just funny the way that we're even approaching the overall communication of what we're trying to do. So we're trying to appeal to a lot of people. Okay, Kristen put in the Regenesis Institute. Yeah, that might have been where I got that information from. So Pamela, our good friend Pamela, who came to visit us in Kansas just a couple weeks ago, she wants to ask this question about the Great Plains. So she says, the future of the plains is that it's going to be hotter with less water. The soil sponge is the most powerful tool that we have to keep the US in the food basket of the world. Do farmers in the high plains believe that things are changing as fast as they really are? Or is climate change awareness still part of the heavy lifting? So I'll take a quick stab and then I'll hand it over to Liz and Russell. I would say even just 2 years ago, I didn't maybe give a big presentation and use the word climate change. I would talk about climate change. I would talk about all of the elements, but maybe I didn't see it. Me personally, I've kind of broken down that barrier. I'm like, yeah, we're going to talk about it. Like this is exactly what's happening. I have evidence to base my presentations off of. I have information about desertification, the disruption in the small water cycle. Plus we have radar that we can show people. So I feel like we've got more evidence, but Liz, what's your take on is using the term climate change? Is that still heavy lifting in some areas, maybe down in Texas?
I was gonna say, unless I want to get in a fist fight, which sometimes I might want to, but I don't talk about it that way. I think, if you're farming somewhere, how variable the weather is, and it doesn't really have to be something that we need to explain to people. I think farmers and even scientists can realize the value of increasing, the soil sponge and increasing infiltration and really getting effective rainfall, especially as it's getting hotter and drier. I think one thing that people don't look at a lot is how the farming practices that we use, or even, expanding cities into farmland, we're creating microclimates for ourselves. If you stand over a field that's got cover crops on it, it's cooler than if you're in a bare field. That's a very visible change. Well, that change also affects the upper atmosphere. And I think everybody here has probably seen those awesome pictures of that ranch down in Mexico where, it is raining on their side and not on the other side of the fence. So, I know several farmers that have told me, the water is going around my neighbor's farm and coming to my farm because of what I'm doing and the practices that I'm implementing. And so I think as more and more people become aware of how we're actually affecting the climate, even on a small scale, that people are going to want to change their practices so that they can become more profitable. And so I don't really feel like I have to go out and push climate change.
So I will say probably one of the best things that I got to see in my farming career is I went to Kansas. That was my first trip outside of North Carolina. And I met Candy Thomas at a field day. And, I think while climate change is an issue for farmers, I think the number one thing, and I'll give Lance Gunderson the credit for this. The plow is not the most harmful thing to the plains. It's fallow. I watched a pan evaporation rate of 60 inches in Kansas. It doesn't even rain 60 inches, I would say, in 3/4 of the state. And they're evaporating more than what they have available, just because of pan evaporation in fallow ground. And yes, it's hard to get farmers to understand that cover crops will use a little bit of moisture. But at the same time, even if you're using a little bit and stopping pan evaporation and keeping more moisture in the ground. That's hugely critical to biological functioning. And then the other part of it is building organic matter can hold, roughly an acre inch, which is about 27,000 gallons per acre. Those are things that we're paying attention to. So I think, farmers, not only in the plains, but farmers across the country are starting to, they're starting to pay attention to those things and how we monitor that as farmers and change it.
Yeah, I think the communication part is key. Like, we didn't have that in the past. And I think that the language surrounding climate change was very like war focused. Like, we're going to fight it, which means if we're going to fight climate change, we have to fight for, farmers and all this other stuff. So I think that the language and the messaging has changed to the point where, just like Candy was our last guest on the webinar last month. I love Candy. I think she's super badass. But yeah, I get what you're saying, Russell. It's more of a show me what's going on. And at that point, you don't really need to have the conversation about, whether it is or it isn't. Just let your eyes tell the truth for you, So, okay. And then the other thing that we were talking about, somebody up here, Kristen, was asking about keyline design. And I don't know if you guys, I don't have as much experience with keyline design. I know that Dale Strickler has a new book coming out here in a couple weeks, and he's going to spend a good portion of that on keyline design work within the cropping system. But Liz or Rick, have you guys done any sort of consulting work that focuses on changing the landscape of the entire field?
Go, Russell.
I've not worked with keyline design. That's not something that that I've been a part of or dealt with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not either. Let's that'll be a great way to segue into, we should invite Dale Strickler to the webinar and have him tell us about keyline. And I know just GPR's focus too has been on agroforestry. And this might be a really good transition to talk about how we have done farming in a certain way in the United States and really across the world that has just been single crop centric. And you talk about fallow in Kansas. Well, what do we do in Kansas? We plant wheat. And then what do we do between planting wheat? Nothing, right? So this idea is not new, of stacking your operations, having multiple revenue streams. And for GPR, our focus has been agroforestry. How do we take a look at different edible crops that we can stack, that we can layer upon a single acre? So some of our projects are going to involve small acre situations, and they're going to develop markets based on woody nut trees and hazelnuts, et cetera. So talk to me a little bit, Liz and Russell, how did you guys come up with this idea that farmer first, you guys wanted to do something, you wanted to implement some sort of action? So, what was kind of that thought process? How'd you get there? I'm sure it involved having a meeting.
It all started with a road trip.
A road trip.
Yeah, really.
Urban.
Yeah.
And bourbon. Well, okay. That's part of the stacked operation.
And beer. Yeah.
And beer.
I honestly, I think it all started this summer that, I think everybody was excited to get reconnected. I think we all had some ideas in the back of our head of really, how did our food system change within, this pandemic when it hit back in, 2020, and, grocery store shelves were empty. You couldn't get meat, you couldn't get certain items that you're used to having. And, we started seeing on our farm, meat production sales went through the roof. In North Carolina now, if you want to get an animal slaughtered, I think the waiting list right now for a USDA facility is like 14 to 18 months.
Wow.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane. And they've actually built new facilities in the last 12 months, and it's still kind of crazy. So, we saw a very big shift. I think it was a huge shift in our food system, that people, have always relied on a grocery store and never really thought about the farmer much until there wasn't food in the grocery store, and then everybody wanted a farmer. I can't tell you how many additional friends that I had from the area that on Facebook and saw that we had, pork and beef for sale and grits and cornmeal. And I think this is a very, huge time for us to come together and to be able to strike while the iron's hot. And I feel like I know farming fairly well. There's, a large group of farmers that I would call my good friends. And then, Liz and Jessica, both of y'all are included in that, Sarah Varble. And y'all are, crazy good on computers and putting models and systems together for us farmers not to go broke. And I think it was just all of us coming together. It was at the right time and at the right moment. And that's why we decided to really focus on, hitting agriculture with something new. And that's how we came up with Regen meals and the things that we're going to do with it. And I think in the last month we've came up with like three new businesses, Liz, in the last 3 months that we're going to try to implement to farmers, look at making 90% of the profit instead of 2% of the profit. And that's our main focus, is really seeing farmers succeed in what they're doing.
Yeah. And so what happens is one of us will say, oh, I have an idea. And the other ones are like, okay, yeah, let's do that. Let's do that. And we need to stop having so many ideas because I'm getting swallowed. But it's, yeah. And everybody has such different skills. And even within, the whole community of soil health and all of our good friends, which are more like family, everybody has a different skill set. And it's really nice to be able to call someone and say, what do you know about this? Or can you help me set this up or something like that? It's just and I think a lot of what we want to do is take that community and expand it out to people that aren't currently included.
Well, it's funny. Years ago when I had like my big aha moment and had a real personal health crisis that led me to the soil, I had this overwhelming fear that there's nothing I could do. There's no way I can make an impact. I'm not a soil scientist. I'm not an agronomist. And funny story, I met my friend Trish, who's a PhD, and she's been focused on community systems and the ability. She gives this really great presentation about decentralizing food production. And I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, like I can do so much more work because I know that I've got Trish that, when I need to bounce ideas off of her, she's right there. And her and I were real fortunate to live in the same small town in Kansas. So there's my plug on Dr. Trish Jackson. She is going to be on the Farmer Friday webinar for next month. So sorry, Trish, I did not prep you for this. I think you're on the webinar, aren't you right now? Are you here?
Yeah, I'm here.
What's up, Trish? Thank you so much for popping on. And like I said, you are next month's featured speaker.
Well, goody. Thank you. It's been fun to hear everybody talking about the history of this. Everybody has their own story about how they came to be inspired by this mission. And it's great to have this community here to talk about it. I'm the director of regenerative agriculture for Prairie Food. And so I'll get to talk to everyone next week about that role. And then we also have a soil health workshop coming up, Prairie Food Forum and Soil Health Workshop in Pratt, Kansas on November 15th and 16th. That day too might be of interest to people here on this call because it's going to be led by Liz and her group. Russell's going to be talking both days. So Russell's going to lead a lot of the training part of the workshop on day 2. But that one's going to be really focused on helping farmers do what they're trying to do, make those decisions. And Prairie Food can be a part of that to kind of smooth out the pathway of that transition. So I'll stop talking now.
That was fantastic. And that takes me, so Liz, you and Russell have some product offerings right now. You guys have some services that you've been doing for a number of years, but you've repackaged your service offering a little bit. So can you tell us a little bit about what you guys are offering?
Liz, you go first.
Okay. I was staring at you. Yeah. So like I said, I really enjoy putting together events and conferences and trainings and stuff like that. So that's definitely one part of it. But like with Russell and the group of people that we have working with us, like a lot of times people leave really inspired and then they go home and they don't know what to do. And so we want to take it from, boots on the ground to learning to your aha moment to support to what do you need, all the way down to soil testing, management plans, anything to help a farmer along the path towards profitability. Russell.
So, I'm not good at putting on conferences, and that's why Liz is so great at it. For me as a farmer, it goes back to what I said in the beginning, that peer-to-peer network. And like Liz, just stated, so many farmers come and get charged and amped up, and they want to go back, and they've heard all these great things about the soil and soil biology, but they don't know how to change a setting on their drill or their planter, or how to deal with a mixed species cover crop, or how to terminate it, how to roll or crimp it. And I think that's where our group really can really focus on helping farmers with the nuts and bolts of how to implement these systems, how to, visually, what are we going to look for? What are we going to test for? How are we going to judge, what we're doing on our farming operation? That's ultimately going to be a benefit to us and a benefit to the soil. And then, also we bring some other stacked enterprises into it as well. We've been grinding up grits and cornmeal since 2017. And, everybody talked about wanting to have a location to, grind and produce regenerative grains into food products. And I'm pretty good at building things. I think this is probably going to be one of my larger challenges, but we are actually putting a milling operation inside of a enclosed trailer that can be pulled behind a pickup truck. And we can travel to your farm, and we can grind up your corn into grits and cornmeal. We can grind up flour or wheat into flour. We can do extracted flours. We'll have a bagging system to where we can bag and package that system, and essentially give the farmer a way to market their grain some other way than selling it to a commodity elevator. And the amount of return, I don't even know what the difference is, percentage wise, but to give you an idea, if you sell 1 acre of wheat flour, it would be a higher revenue than about 100 acres of commodity wheat. And that's even at these higher prices that we're seeing right now on the board. And, corn was somewhere around like 1 acre of corn into grits and cornmeal was equivalent to about 180 acres of commodity corn. And that was figuring in $5.50 a bushel, which we don't typically see as farmers. So, as commodity prices change, that would be even a greater advantage. So, looking at managing risk and, cutting down on input cost and maximizing return to the farmers is what my key is here, and hopefully what our group is able to achieve.
It feels sometimes, I love your presentations, Russell, and I can't tell you how many times I've shared your 2018 Minokan Farms keynote presentation when I'm trying to tell people about regenerative, and I try to tell people about the things that we can do. Why is this not being done? I mean, I know in your part of the country, grits are big. I've actually probably never experienced grits to the level that you have. But that doesn't mean that we can't grow grits in Kansas. I mean, we can. So what's the big holdup? Why is this not happening?
I think most farmers are great at farming and they're terrible marketers. Even in the commodity market, most farmers don't. There's too much emotion involved. I mean, honestly, I got quoted one time in a TV show series, and I literally said, I put my heart and my soul in my crops. I really do. There's times of the year where we may farm so hard, trying to get over acres. We're scouting, we're spot spraying, we're trying to plant, we're trying to move animals, you literally can almost work your body in the ground. And when you put that much time and heart and effort into growing something, you have an emotional connection to it, whether you understand that or not. And farmers get emotionally charged to, growing that commodity. And at the end of the day, they don't also think of it as a business. I mean, you talk to any farmer and you say, why do you farm? It's the greatest lifestyle in the world. That's what everybody will tell you. It is a lifestyle. It's not a job. It's, it's the way I live. It's something I love. And they, at the end of the day, they don't really think about what is that return on investment? What is that money? At the end of the day, we all have bills to pay. And you've got to think of it sometimes as a business side. So I think that's where we come in, and we're setting up an e-commerce website where farmers can market this through the internet anywhere, in the United States. And we're putting this together and trying to do what most farmers are not good marketers. And so we're trying to do that for them and allow them to do the thing they do best, and that's grow a great crop. And, I think that's ultimately what we bring to the table.
So we get stuck in our own brain sometimes.
Yeah. And I think part of the problem too is that you have so many people in the industrial ag and industrial food system that are, this has to be our profit margin for the company.
Mm-hmm.
And what we think of first is, what is the farmer's profit margin? And we know that if we take care of them and help them the best that we possibly can, that we'll also be successful. Because I wouldn't want to be successful on the back of a farmer. I want them to be successful.
Well, that happens all the time. Carolyn, our friend Carolyn, she'll share that graphic about increased profit over the last couple decades. And I think the information came from Canada, but it would be similarly applied to the United States. And it showed agribusiness profits just kind of, like scaling up exponentially, and then farmer profits trending downward. And I think I had read, I don't know how accurate this is, but the percent debt ratio is actually increasing. So year after year, more farmers are going into debt at a steady pace. And that's not the purpose of this. That's not why we're here. That's not why we work in agriculture, and many farmers are losing their ass right now. So I see what you guys are doing as a solution to that. So is this a prototype, or is this something that you think can be replicable in a lot of different bioregions?
I think it's something that's definitely built, we can build upon it. My goal and what I would love to see is enough people support farmers that we could have a trailer in, one trailer for every 4 states. That would keep me from driving so much with this trailer hauling it around the country. But it's definitely something I think that if we advocate for it, if we make enough noise about it, if we spend our time wisely in educating, I mean, we're educating farmers, but we're also educating the public. Think about it. How many people could you walk up to and, tell them that the only food they could eat for a year is what they grew? People would starve. I remember, 5 years ago, I was talking about Silver Queen sweet corn, and some kid asked me if that was edible. And I was like, man, that was the best stuff back in the day. That's all my grandpa would grow. But, we have our education system. And I say this, our education system has failed. We teach kids how to read books and become doctors and lawyers, but nobody knows how to change a car tire, balance a checkbook, or grow their own food. And, that's something that we have to be good at as farmers, is educating the public. And it's not easy. I've had people call me before and tell me they want to buy a whole hog and they want it all in bacon, and they don't understand that that's one small area of the hog, but they think you can make a whole hog into bacon. And I wish I could at $10 a pound. It'd be great, but it takes time and education to teach the consumer about what we're growing, how we're growing it, and even that it's one of the things that we're going to focus on. Is Liz and Rick and Lance, a bunch of smart people are coming up with a way for us to measure what we're doing, and then also do nutrient density testing. And and show that the products that we're growing are better for the consumer, and actually, food makes people healthier.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about that at Fuller Field School.
I'd like to point out, so my daughter is in the 6th grade, and she comes home yesterday and tells me, oh, guess what they're teaching in ag class? And I said, what? She said, archery. Like, okay. So they don't teach them a single thing about ag history, the, industrial revolution, what farming really is. It's not any part of the education that kids are receiving. And it's not like I live in a big city. It's a town of 2,500. There's ranches all on one side of the interstate and farms on the other. And they drive by them, but my kids know, but not all of the kids know what's going on or what's growing in the field. And I wasn't raised with any type of ag education. And I think that's a real loss and a real disservice to
I agree.
everybody.
And same here, living in Kansas, some stuff by default, but I have to laugh because, archery, at least maybe couldn't she kill her own food and eat it? Like, I'm thinking
have you met Maggie?
I'm thinking of if COVID got really bad, Maggie would be, the person on our team that could, help us out. And then Russell could make bacon out of it, right?
Well, out here, you can just walk out in the front yard and pretty much tackle a deer and you're good.
That's funny. That's almost happened to me one time at your house, but that's for a different reason. But I do love this conversation because the kids, Russell, I remember the first time you called me up and you were like, I got this great idea. And I listened to you for a while, and it's still a great idea. And I think we should do it, but it involved creating messages for kiddos. And, my husband and I, we lived on the country. We didn't live on the area that we farmed. We did homestead our backyard, and we've got acres that we farm. But yeah, my kids aren't really intimately involved with anything farming. But when we drive down the highway from Manhattan to Salina out west by like where Michael Thompson lives, I remember one time my son just shaking his head. He's like, look at all that bare soil, Mom. And he'd say, Gabe Brown, it's funny because we'd listen to YouTube videos in the car. He's like, oh, Gabe Brown would talk about that bare soil, Mom, what are we going to do about that? So yeah, we do. We need to get the kiddos involved. And I know you've got a special place in your heart for child education, Russell. I know you do. I'm gonna get you a little emotional here.
It's cause I'm a kid at heart. I'm never growing up, no matter how.
Yeah. So you want to tell a story about Sasquatches. Tell us a little bit about Sasquatches, Russell.
You want me to tell them about our idea for children education?
Well, I don't know. Maybe it's proprietary, so maybe we don't share it right now. Okay.
So the funny thing about Sasquatches is we were at National No-Till, and we may have drank a little too much, and we were making Sasquatch calls in the dinner room while they were giving out awards, like people do the pig calling up in Iowa. But, essentially it's kind of a way for us to measure as farmers, what we're doing with cover crops. That's where the Sasquatch comes from. And, we say, keep it squatchy. You want your cover crops so thick, in the words of Adam Daugherty, so thick that at least 3 Sasquatch families could live on each farm and you wouldn't know they were there. And it's really just about thinking about the ground before yourself, thinking about, the investment in the ground will be the investment it gives back to you. And that's really why we focus on, growing as much biomass as we can and building organic matter and all the things we've talked about today with, water retention, nutrient cycling. And that's the biggest thing is we haven't even fully harvested the 2021 crop yet. And a report came out yesterday that said that because the input prices are so high, phosphorus high, that they're expecting farmers next year to lose more money than they did in 2019. We haven't even harvested this crop or planted the next crop. And they're already saying that, they're looking at agriculture as a whole is going to lose billions of dollars. And it just astonishes me that before we even have a crop in the ground, they're saying everybody's going to lose money.
It's this week, there's been a lot of news come out about prices. Yeah, Russell, there's a lot of room out there to make some big impact. And I'm so thankful for you guys and for your group and for Sarah Varble, that's also on your team, for getting out there and not just sitting on the sidelines, like getting out there and getting it done. I mean, that's what I see that's getting ready to happen. Getting some stuff in the comments here about, people are thanking us for the Kids to Farm group. I think that's Deanna Kinsey. Great to have you here with American Farmland Trust. She says, don't forget, you guys are all great resources for your local ag teachers. I had a local ag teacher from the town we used to live in. I tag her on posts all the time. They're not taught any of this stuff either. So getting in with the teachers too is going to be key. So Frank says industrial ag in the recent decades have made farmers so reliant on them that for a farmer to leave, it's almost impossible. It is. It's scary to do some of the stuff you guys are talking about. So what's the biggest, have you guys had anybody kind of maybe with cold feet, or has it been an overwhelmingly, yes, we understand it. Yes, we need to make some changes. What have you guys seen from some of your network producers that you're working with right now?
I mean, typically for me, I only see farmers change for one of two reasons. So the first is economic. If you think about Gabe Brown's story of losing 3 or 4 crops and, being at the end of the line, and he had to make a change. The other side is social. It's kind of funny how many times I've went to conferences and the men don't get it. And then the wives tell the men that they're going to farm that way. I actually had a lady from Colorado. They farm and ranch about 15,000 acres, and her husband was really reluctant. And she said, listen, you're either going to do it the right way, or after we divorce it, I'll do it right on my half. And then you can do whatever you want on your half. And then when you lose it, I'll buy it later. And no joke. Next season, they moved to it. I mean, it just seems like, and I know there's a whole movement right now, but honestly, women are better at picking this up. I think they nurture better. And like Jessica said, y'all have feelings. We just bottle ours inside. But it just seems like that social pressure. And as you start looking in the last year, you can't pick up a national magazine without hearing about soil health. You've heard Gabe and Ray and several farmers. A lot of us have been up to Washington, D.C. and talked to legislative people about, changing the laws that are prohibiting farmers from doing better practices. It really seems like this is a snowball and we're finally getting bigger and going down the right hill. So it's kind of exciting.
Yeah, I've had the big D talk with my husband a couple years ago when we were working with Darren Unruh on putting in some cover crops. And the big D for us was dicamba, because I didn't want to go back into that system. Out of a span of like three seasons, I think I lost the conversation one time, but for the most part had to come up with different ways to farm with soil health, because our good friend in the same region was a specialty crop producer. And, she was about, 3.5, 4 miles from the nearest field that sprayed, and she lost a majority of her livelihood. So yeah, I mean, we've had to have a lot of these conversations, and I do think the women have been really impactful of recent. I see Deanna's up there shaking her head, when you're telling that story. So but yeah, Liz, from your perspective, what's it going to take to have these changes and do it fast? Other than putting women in charge, because we know that that's really effective right now.
Yeah, we got that covered. I think it's a lot of it is really doing down to earth education and connecting with the farmers as human beings, and pulling back on the preachy a little bit. I think, like Russell said, he still uses a chemical out there. He's not going to go yell at someone who needs to do that. I think it's important to work within the context of each farmer's needs and have them also realize, like I've heard some people will switch practices because, weed control. identifying those kind of problems and helping them through it on the ground is going to be critical, and that's not fast, but it's very effective.
Yeah, meeting people where we're at, a lot of the conferences that I get to be a part of, we do a lot of surveys. And I think we hear that over and over and over again is staying at the basic level and just keep repeating the information so that as new situations arise, people have a framework for decision making, as opposed to just XYZ, do XYZ and being kind of hammered that into your brain. Okay, guys, I'm going to transition here. I would love for everybody to turn on their cameras. Let's see a little bit who you are, what you're up to. And I really want to leave this time open for folks to ask a question. So feel free to unmute yourself, put up your hand, whatever you want to do, and ask a question. And if you don't mind, just put in the chat for me, like who you are, where you're from, what's up, anything you want to add. But does anybody have any specific questions they just want to go for right now? Because you guys know me, I've got a ton of questions. My whole brain is filled with questions. What's up, Lit? What's up, Trish?
I'd like to hear about how we're linking soil health to nutrient density. I think there needs to be more work done there. And so I wondered about what tests we're using, or, how we're making that connection.
I'll just briefly hand that off to Liz and Russell real quick, but we accidentally made beer over the summer. And it was a situation where we were doing a fundraiser, and long story short, we decided we had a brewer that was willing to make it for us. When we ran the analytics on Darren Unruh's Turkey Red Wheat versus the supply that they were able to get from the beverage supply chain, it blew people away. So I don't really have a big technical explanation for that, other than it's my belief that because he had healthy soil, he produced a more nutrient crop. But I'll turn that over to the specialists on the call, Liz and Russell. What are you guys seeing?
Yeah. So we actually are bringing on a nutritionist to help us talk through all this and do it the right way to test not only the grain, but also the healthy soil. And when I think about why something might be more nutrient dense in a regenerative system, I mean, first you're having that biological activity is actually increasing nutrient cycling. So you're not in this more sterile atmosphere where all of the nutrients are kind of on hold, except for what fertilizer you put out. So, there's some research out there that links this, but it's still being developed a lot from the scientific standpoint. And I think that the more testing we do and start making consumers aware, fortunately, our nutritionist also used to run a grocery store. And so she's very familiar with, speaking to the consumer. And it was an organic grocery store. So she, everything was higher priced, but she had to really explain why that was more important. And so I think there needs to be the testing and the research, but also the messaging, and so that people really become aware of it without greenwashing it.
I mean, I think it drives my decisions as a mom. Oh, go ahead, Frank. Frank has a question.
Yeah, evaluating the difference, what we found this year, which was our first experiment with the new sheep, and we bred some sheep that came originally from the Middle East and Africa, and we directed the meat from these sheep to ethnic cultures from the same area. And the feedback that I got from the wholesaler guy, was that the meat from our sheep tasted like the meat from the sheep back home. And so because we run our sheep with almost no intervention, so we don't drench them, we don't vaccinate, we don't backline them, we don't from this year on, we don't mark the lamb at the boys, because back home, the males are entire when they're slaughtered. And so we don't fertilise our pastures. We only spray for one weed, and it's a spot spray, and we have to do it, otherwise the council send in a contractor and boom spray the whole lot of our place. So, we're working from a really natural base, and it's reflected in the taste of the meat that our customers are eating. And to me, that's the only proof I need.
Yeah, I'm making this up right now. It's like when you're testing bricks on plants, it has a higher sugar level. I don't know. Seriously, I'm probably just talking out my butt, but I think that it does create a better tasting product.
You're not talking out of your butt.
But I mean, is that kind of the same idea, Liz? Like, as the plant gets healthier, it has a higher sugar content. It's able to fend off diseases and pests better. It's able to communicate through the soil fungal networks about its current health status. I mean,
increase photosynthetic activity. And I mean, but the whole system is so complex. And I think I told Trish this the other day, like, if someone tells you they understand the whole entire system and why this is happening, they're totally lying to you.
Yeah.
So it's just not possible.
Or capture them. They're a unicorn and we should study them.
Yes. And we should figure out.
You guys can come to North Dakota. I totally have it figured out over here.
Do you? Deanna
Oh,
does.
yes. Oh, yes. We know everything.
Deanna's going to plant turkey red because it's the best way to stay at the bottom of the tax bracket.
That's what they told me on Twitter.
Did they? Well, here's the thing. So we're trying to talk about turkey red, and our good buddy Darren Unruh, he's like, Jessica, it's going to yield 50% of a modern variety. Is that what your take is too, Deanna? Like, or even Liz or Russell, when we're talking about some of these heritage or heirloom type crops, like, without the market, is that why producers aren't doing it? Because traditionally they can expect a half of a yield compared to a modern variety.
Do you want me to give you the seed genetics of it and why that happens?
I don't know.
I
do. So this is what people should understand. We always like to do things that are easy. And so breeding a hybrid is easier than selecting genetics for pollinated. And I have met enough seedsmen that, and when I say this, I mean, these are gentlemen and ladies. There was actually a couple ladies that were doing open pollinated hybrids back in the 20s. I mean, they were in their 90s, the people I had a conversation with in Iowa. They used to go out and hand select ears for their seed corn company. And it was a whole lot easier just to plant a hybrid and cut off all the tassels on 6 rows and let 2 rows pollinate with their male varieties. And if we would have stuck with open pollinated varieties, their genetics would be just as good as hybrids today, is what they said. And so, yes, heirloom varieties do not yield as well, but if you hand select for, like on our farm, we look for stalk strength and ear quality. Every year that we do that, we see a better, succession of crops. And so if you take the time and manage it, it can do just as good. We've had crops that have done extremely well as open pollinated corn crops that even beat the county average for modern traded hybrids. But it takes time and effort to get there, and it's hot in the summertime, and most farmers aren't willing to do that stuff anymore, and that's just the truth of it.
Well, we've talked about just the difference in crop scouting. You coming as a first generation farmer, to you, a lot of that made sense, to get out there and to understand how to scout throughout the season and make decisions throughout the season versus just what has always been done. Okay, guys, I apologize. We have 2 minutes left. Anybody else that has a question, just unmute yourself, ask. And I see my buddy Carl's on the phone. Carl, I wanted to tell you that I got my new hat that you sent me, but I can't wear it because I wear these really nerdy earphones because I can't hear very good. So thank you for the hat, Carl. Carl sent that to me. He's with Soil for Climate, doing a lot of really good nonprofit work for us. So thank you, Carl.
Thank you, Jess. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Anybody else have any questions for Liz Haney or Russell Hedrick? How can we get a hold of you two?
Yeah, so we're on Facebook with Regen Mills and also Soil Regen. There's contact information there. And then, you can check out www.agsoilregen.com. And our contact information is on there as well.
Cool. And everybody should come to our soil health, our Prairie Food Forum and soil health workshop that GPR has the privilege of being able to help coordinate. It's on November 15th and 16th in Pratt, Kansas, USA. If you would like to come, we've got some, it's just $40 to come for the 2-day event. And we would love to see you all there. You get to hang out with me and Trish and Liz and Russell. And that is worth $40. I mean, for the 4 of us, it's worth $40.
Jessica, don't forget to tell them, Jessica, that we'll have bourbon and beer samples, right?
Yes.
Cowboy lemonades.
Yeah, cowboy lemonades. Woo.
Is that approved? I don't know if that's approved. Yes, Frank, you should come.
Oh, yeah.
Frank's always-
Alcoholism, yeah, I like that.
Frank is always commenting on whether I'm holding a drink in my Facebook pictures or not.
Yes. Well, he accused me of shenanigans the other day.
Yeah.
Like he knows me.
Y'all are just some young whippersnappers.
Okay, who else didn't get on the call? Nathan, thank you for being here. Nathan's one of our Ohio supporters. Actually, I'm going to stop the recording and then we can keep going. So as the conclusion, thank you guys all for being here.